Feeling motivated, staying motivated is pretty important when you're on a healing journey. Really, any sort of personal growth or development, we need to be motivated to keep going. But how you become motivated or how you stay motivated, the things that tend to motivate you, can actually be creating more difficulty to stay motivated. And there are ways that we can feel motivated that really help not only keep us motivated, but actually can become part of our healing. Welcome, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. I'm doing this video today because I came across a video on TikTok and it was interesting. If you're on TikTok and you watch any videos related to cleaning, there's a good chance that you have seen some really kind of unfortunate drama, I guess. They're related to somebody who has kind of blown up pretty quickly in terms of followers, I guess. I don't know who that person is. And the other person, it's her video that I saw initially, and I happen to agree with her. It turns out she's actually a former therapist. But this controversy, so to speak, came up because this person who grew really quickly, her style is, so she shares videos about cleaning, I guess, mostly. And her style is very different than this other person's style. And there are a lot of people who feel very strongly one way or the other. This video isn't about that, but the approach between the two really made me think about, and the comments actually from people made me think about how really significant this is and how much a part of it can play a role in how you feel along this journey and the ways in which we can benefit, but also be not necessarily harmed, but can certainly create barriers, I guess is a good way to say it, to actual healing. So the person who grew quite quickly, her style is very regimented, shame-inducing, like there's no reason you shouldn't be able to do this and you just need to decide to do this and that sort of thing. And a lot of people felt like that is what they needed. People started doing other videos where they talked about how beneficial it was and how they're getting up and making their bed every day and how great that feels. And the other person, the video that I saw, she was talking about how that approach generally isn't going to be very effective. And ultimately, the reason that it's not going to be very effective is because it is creating pseudo motivation. It's creating the sense of judgment and shame and being critical of maybe who you are or how you do things or choices that you make or don't make. And when we talk about healing, there is an initial motivation that gets you to decide to start healing, right? And I've talked about this before, but so often, the majority of people, it is something related to feeling like you are failing in some way. Maybe failing yourself, but often feeling like you're failing as a human in your relationship, that you need to be better, that how you are, the struggles that you're having, the ways that that's showing up in your life is not enough. It's bad. It's something to be ashamed of. And we could argue, right, that, okay, well, whatever gets you in the door, whatever starts your journey, that can't be a bad thing. And I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that. And this is part of the reason why I think working with somebody is important, because while that can be effective to get you in the door, it's what started my healing journey. I felt like my children and my husband deserved more than who I was. What I also recognized, somewhat through my own healing, but really in my work helping other people heal, is that the motivation, so if we start healing from that place, or anything really, from that place, it can get us going. We can feel good about the fact that we got going. But that energy that's driving that motivation is not sustainable, because there's going to be a time when maybe you feel a little less motivated. There's going to be a time when you cancel that therapy appointment. There's going to be a time when you don't make the bed. For whatever reason, there could be very valid reasons. It could be just that you're not feeling it today. But either way, whatever the reason, you are likely going to try to use the same type of motivation to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I talk about this all the time, but one of the most important practices when it comes to healing, and when I say practice, I mean you have to practice it a lot over time. It's self-compassion. And I know in conversations that I have had with people that so often people feel like if you're being self-compassionate, you're giving yourself a little grace or understanding, a little respite, whatever it might be. If you're being compassionate with yourself, then you are letting yourself off the hook. You're not creating circumstance in which you need to change or feel the need to change. You're creating a circumstance in which you're less likely to create drive in somebody. But if you think about just children developmentally and what is most effective in raising children, whether it's as a parent or in communities, in schools, how the adults in their lives show up. Yes, you can get a child to do the things that you want them to do by shaming them, by being critical of them, by creating fear about what will happen if they don't do it, right? Religion, I think, is a great example of this, particularly Christianity. You have to be a good person. You have to do this. You have to do that in order to be good, in order for things to happen or not to happen. But we all know at this point what happens for people who grow up in homes, whether it's about religion or something else, some other type of parenting. And I'm not here to judge your parenting. But what tends to happen to those children? They tend to maybe become very perfectionistic, or sometimes they go the opposite direction and tend to not follow through on things. They tend to not do the things that they need to do, even for themselves, because they tend to feel like a failure. So why does it matter? Or they tend to feel somewhat like paralyzed by not getting it right, or not being able to do it. That does not create a healthy human. It certainly doesn't create a happy human. But if we show children compassion, if we teach them to be self-compassionate, they become self-motivated. And there are times that pushing yourself or being pushed into something can be beneficial, but it's incredibly important to have awareness around what that motivation is creating. So, for example, I've had conversations, a variety of types of conversations around this issue with not only clients, but even just people in my personal life about, like, when you are a perfectionist, when you're hard on yourself, when you are somebody who really is very intentional about seeing what went right or what went wrong and checking off goals and tasks and that sort of thing, there can be some benefit in that type of thing, right? You can gain something from that at times. And people often will feel like, well, if I can see how I didn't do my best, or if I can see how this really was a failure and I could have done it better if I had just studied more or tried harder or whatever it is, then the next time I did that, I tried harder, I studied more, whatever it is, and I did better. So therefore, it works. Well, how did you feel? How did you feel about yourself as you did that? How do you feel about yourself now? Are you able to feel, like, really feel good about that sense of accomplishment? Are you able to feel proud of it? Or are you still beating yourself up because you didn't do it right the first time? How are you feeling after you accomplish that and you move on to the next thing? How are you talking to yourself? Are you being encouraging like we would be to a child who is trying something or wanting to complete something? Or are you being abusive, potentially even to yourself, with harshness and criticism? Maybe even calling yourself names, thinking that you have to get this thing done or you have to do it right. If you don't, then what does it say about me? And that is the reality for a lot of people, even without any sort of trauma history, because that's really the society that we grow up in. We are not taught about how to be healthy, emotional beings, or emotionally healthy beings. Emotions are good, even the ones that make us feel not so good. They tell us something. They help us understand and recognize things. We can be not necessarily hard on ourselves, but we can hold ourselves accountable. We can push ourselves in a way that is not only productive in terms of being able to do the thing or get it done, but also in a way that honors the reality of who we are and where we are at any given time. I've talked about this in regards to, like, self-care. So many people tend to think that self-care is a waste of time, it's selfish, it's whatever. And in all reality, practicing self-care mindfully and intentionally is an important part of healing, because it in part helps you recognize that you are worthy of that time. If you are almost always harsh with yourself, you only get to rest when you complete this thing, when you get all your cleaning tasks checked off. When you only allow yourself moments of rest after all of that, or after whatever it is, you're not honoring your need or desire for rest. You're saying, okay, now I can do this because I got all those other things done, and getting these other things done, or doing this thing, or feeling this way or whatever. That is what matters. And yes, of course, there are things that we have to do. There are things that are important for us to do. But I really would encourage you to, if you are somebody who tends to beat yourself up a lot, particularly if you feel like berating yourself or being critical of yourself, shaming yourself is what really motivates you, I would really encourage you to reflect on how you're actually feeling leading up to getting that thing done. How you're feeling, how you're able to take in that sense of accomplishment. Do you really feel good? Does it sustain you? Or is it very short-lived until you get the next thing done? And I want to acknowledge that when you get that thing done, especially if you're somebody who maybe doesn't tend to get that thing done, when you get that thing done, you are likely going to feel good, potentially even really good. Because in that moment when you get it done, because you're so driven, the energy that drove you to get that done is coming from a deep-seated place of survival. So there's a lot of energy that goes into that. So once that is complete, that energy is still there. You're going to feel something that feels potentially even like euphoric. We do get an increase in dopamine when we accomplish something, when we finish something. So you might feel really great, but how long does it last? And are you able to feel that sense of accomplishment, of feeling good about something, of feeling a sense of relief? Are you able to feel those things without having to get something done or check something off? Because it's important that we have the ability to experience those things without it coming from having to check something off, and certainly without it having to come from first judging or shaming ourselves. And when we meet ourselves with self-compassion and understanding, because we are actually healing something, yes, it is small, it's moments of small things, but there's actually healing that's happening when we meet ourselves with self-compassion versus reinforcing that we are only enough when we get this thing done, that we only earn rest or that iced coffee or whatever it is once we get things done. So I just really encourage you to think about that. And even if you're not necessarily somebody who is really harsh with yourself, but maybe don't feel that you've earned something unless you get something done. An interesting thing about this is that the more compassionate you can be with yourself, the more you can maybe break things down and feel good about getting one piece of it done versus the whole thing, waiting until everything's complete about it. You end up feeling motivated, energized, from a place that is healthy, from a place that is more free, less constraints, less having to do it exactly the way that you think it needs or should be done. Because I know we can all relate to that to some degree, right? Like thinking that things need to be done in a particular type of way. Even our own healing, we think needs to be done in a particular kind of way. And that does not feel good. Like literally there's constraints. We can feel constriction. Whether it's making a bed or healing, we can feel a sense of constraint around, constriction around the need to do it, the idea that it should be done specifically the way that you think. When we are more grounded and that energy is coming from a more authentic and healthy place, we're free. So literally that constraint, that constriction that we might feel, it's not there any longer. And when we approach things that need to get done, whether it is cleaning something in your house, doing the dishes, healing, or making dinner, or getting that project done at work, whatever it is, when we approach it from that grounded, authentic place, the energy that we feel as we're doing it is lighter and freer. And when I talk about healing is about freedom, that is part of what I'm talking about. Because of course there are always going to be things that we have to do that we don't want to do. That's not going to change. But how we feel when we do them changes significantly. The whole process feels differently when we approach it from a place that is not harsh or critical. So I would really encourage you to maybe even after this, get your journal out and think about how you tend to be motivated. And I know even when it comes to things related to mental health, people can feel really motivated by things that are like you need to, I don't know, I can't think of anything specific that I've heard right now, but the idea that, you have the power to heal from your trauma. You just have to make a decision to do it. And in some ways that can feel empowering. Like, okay, all I have to do is make a decision to do it and I can heal. Sign me up. I'm ready. I'm making that decision right now. That can feel motivating. That can feel empowering. That can get you through that door. But the reality is nothing in life really, generally speaking, especially when it comes to mental well-being, is as simple as making a decision. I wish that it were, but it isn't. So that might help you feel energized. It may help you feel excited. And there's probably a lot of you that can relate to this at the beginning of your journey. Maybe it didn't come from that specific type of thing, but that energy, right? Like, I'm ready to do this. Tell me what to do. I'm ready. And then when you find yourself struggling, when you aren't journaling, when you thought you were over something and turns out you find yourself struggling with it again, what do you say to yourself in those moments? I've certainly talked about this many times before. Are you critical? Are you harsh? Are you shaming yourself? Are you even feeling powerless or hopeless in being able to heal? Or are you being compassionate with yourself and understanding and recognizing that this is part of the process? Are you putting expectations on yourself that are unrealistic? Or are you recognizing that, okay, I don't like it, but this is part of the process and I know I'm not alone in it? Oftentimes people will feel that they need that like drill sergeant sort of thing. But in reality, it reinforces those core beliefs, those lies that we tend to hold on to. And you deserve compassion. You deserve to experience self-compassion. That little girl or little boy inside of you that held on to feeling responsible, that felt unworthy, believed that they were unworthy, undeserving. The only way that that little one inside of you can heal is through self-compassion. Being harsh, being critical is not the answer, not in the long term. And as we all know, this journey is long term. There is nothing quick about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you tend to feel more motivated when that voice inside or the voice you're hearing externally is a little more drill sergeant-y, a little more critical, a little more pick yourself up by the bootstraps? There's nothing wrong with that. There's certainly nothing to be ashamed in that. That is the reality for so many people. In fact, I would say for the majority of people, it's not until we've typically done some healing, gained a lot of awareness, that self-compassion actually begins to make sense. So I'd love to hear from you, and maybe take this as a sign to practice a little more self-compassion. Thanks so much for being here. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.